Hello folks, I'm Alex, this is Alex Unabridged, and these are my thoughts on City of Last Chances by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, another Adrian Tchaikovsky review for you today. This one is City of Last Chances, which is the first in the Tyrant Philosophers trilogy. This is some fantasy from Mr Tchaikovsky. I've only read science fiction of his until this, but I wanted to try this one to see if I could find some fantasy that I might get on with, because I've not had a huge amount of luck with that genre before. This was a buddy read with Lekden from Reading from the Depths. Lekden is not new to fantasy at all. He's quite a big fantasy fan. But this was his first Adrian Tchaikovsky, whereas for me, this is my seventh Adrian Tchaikovsky, all but one of those being read within the last 6 months. So yes, I've had quite a year with Mr Tchaikovsky. So yes, I think Lekden and I made quite a good pairing on this one. I will give the usual spoiler warning at this point as well. I won't be going into any kind of major spoilers or anything like that, but if you want to go in completely blind, if you're planning on reading this, then do feel free to click away from this video now and come back when you've read it. So what is this about then? It's quite hard to sum up. It's a very rich and complex book, but it is essentially a historical urban fantasy where the fantasy elements of kind of magic and demons and monsters, etc., add flavour into the world as opposed to taking the focus of the story. It is set in a city called Ilmar, the City of Last Chances, which is under occupation from an authoritarian regime. This regime, which is referred to as the Pals, because they're part of the Palatine Empire, they've made it their mission, the Pals, to bring perfection to the whole world, and has been slowly invading and occupying, taking over territories across the world. And they bring with them draconian laws. They control language use. They have their own language which they impose. They dictate, what can be studied, what can be learned in schools and universities, what religions can be practiced, and they rule with fear. And this book is really the story of rebellion from the oppressed peoples of the city, and how the various factions of the resistance are in conflict with each other in how they throw off the shackles of their oppressors. Or indeed whether now is the right time to do anything at all. That's a very, very basic kind of premise for you. So what did I think then? Well, to give you the too long didn't watch version, the short version, this is fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I had a blast with this. It's full of really clever world building. It's got a vast cast of characters to it. It's got some great humour, but also some real darkness. Got magnificent prose. It's nuanced and it's smart. It provides plenty of food for thought with its ideas and its themes. It's got a flavour of something like, say, Les Miserables, but I personally can also draw a fair amount of sort of comparison to events or elements of, say, British social history, and then add in a bit of magic and some monsters and demons, and you've got a really compelling, exciting story that even at its fair length, I mean, I had it on audio and it was 20 hours, it never feels slow or overly dense, in my opinion. So there's your, in a nutshell. I loved it. But a bit more detail then for you. So yes, characters, there is a lot going on in all the various elements in this book. It is complex, it is rich. This is multi-POV, and it's multi-POV to the max. If you are not a big multi-POV fan, then this one might not be for you. Although I would always say give it a go, because it is fantastic. But each chapter is told from a different character perspective. It bounces you around a lot, especially in the beginning. You are constantly meeting a new character each chapter. And to start with, for the first portion of the book, that made it a little bit tricky for me to connect with the actual individual characters. But having said that, I did find that I connected with their situations, their plights, if you like. And as it goes on, we do eventually start to circle back more regularly to a kind of a core group of characters. And once that happened, I really found that I connected with a lot of them, those core characters. And even though we are bouncing around from character to faction, from faction to faction, essentially, of the city, Tchaikovsky threads all of these characters together really well. They do interact, they do form relationships as we go through, and he uses them and these factions that they belong to in his intricate world building. I never felt particularly lost with who was who. It took me a while to kind of get a hold of the names, because the names were a bit strange sometimes, but I never felt that I didn't know who was who and what was what, where we were and all that kind of stuff. As I say, there was a handful of core characters who we got to know much better, and all of those were really well developed. There were a lot of minor characters as well, who popped up in a chapter or two. They were bit parts, but even a lot of those were really memorable characters, and they added intrigue and flavour to the world. Like a character called Hoist, who is the hangman. I loved that. He is a darkly comic character. He tries to sell those condemned to hanging. He tries to sell them a better quality rope, so it won't chafe. And he shaves them to their, to their specification for the gents before they hang. But yeah, he's a really memorable character, and I loved. There was so many characters like that popped in that really gave a lot of depth to the world. There was a little bit of an imbalance, I would say, across some of the factions in the city, in terms of we didn't get anywhere near as many characters in there, or the characters weren't as developed as strongly as in some of the other factions. And I'd like to have seen a bit more balance there, but that's a nitpick really, and that's probably to do with the fact that one of the factions that wasn't quite as developed, or at least the characters within it weren't quite as developed, was one of the factions I was most interested in. So that's, it's a personal gripe really, but it is a nitpick. And you can't do everything. I mean, it's already a long, complex book as it is. Overall, though, there is a great amount of interest and difference across the characters that we meet. But for all the characters that we meet in the story, the people, the main character, I would say, is the city itself. The world building in this and the description of the city, the construct of the city from Tchaikovsky, is phenomenal to me. It's so cleverly done. There isn't an info dump in sight. It's all done really it feels organic, it feels really natural, and it's so detailed. It's really complex, the city. It's a sprawling place with really distinct districts, so much mystery and intrigue. And there are these chapters in it called mosaics, which kind of pull out from these individual character perspectives that we generally get to look at this big picture. And that's the perfect description of the city itself. It's a mosaic. It's all the tiles in the mosaic, the factions, the characters, the districts, etc., are all really and equally individually important in making up this really complex overall picture of what the city is. The writing is brilliant, but I would expect that from Tchaikovsky. It's one of the things that I really love about his work. The prose is elaborate for sure, but it's never purple or flowery. It's just right for me. It's just complex and considered, and it's got a weight to it and a tone to it that really works to convey the atmosphere of the world. The story is often dark, but as I say, he's dry and sometimes absurd humour. There's a little touch of kind of almost Pratchett-esque stuff in there. That's a great balance, that humour to the darkness that you get. And there were numerous laugh out loud moments for me, especially in some of the dialogue. There were some conversations in it which I found absolutely hilarious. The plot itself is sprawling as well. It covers, the happenings across multiple factions, all with their own little stories going on. But all of it's expertly woven back into this overarching plot. It feels chaotic, the plot, like a rebellion should, or kind of, in this case, kind of a series of simultaneous yet somewhat disparate rebellions that kind of come together into one bigger rebellion. That's what it should feel like, but at the same time, the plotting also felt meticulously structured. And I imagine that is a really difficult thing to achieve. And Tchaikovsky nails it, in my opinion, in this. The feel of it is absolutely right, but the structure is so good. The pacing felt about right to me as well. There were a couple of sections where it threatened maybe to get a little bit slow for a bit too long, but then it ramped up again just at the right moment, really. And we got some action or some tension or some intrigue and mystery. I never lost focus with it. It was compelling and engaging throughout the entire 20 hours. Ideas wise, there's a ton of stuff at play in this. The discussion about kind of the intricacies or challenges of rebellion as a concept is great. I really enjoyed that. Like the conflict between the different factions, all of which are part of a resistance essentially, but they all have a different opinion on what rebellion should look like. In terms of like peaceful protest versus violent uprising, for instance. They all have a different opinion on, when should action be taken. And then there's the manipulation and game playing that's going on to try and ensure that the outcome of any rebellion goes in their faction's favour. That their faction is the one who gains the most power from a victory. And the fact that they just can't all, work together to defeat the occupiers. There's a lot to think about on that front alone in terms of, activism, rebellion, revolution, all that kind of stuff. And division between groups, division between different oppressed groups. Then there are a ton of other ideas and discussions that Tchaikovsky works in. So things like religion and faith, the situation for immigrants and refugees and how they're treated by the native population, workers' rights and trade unions, authoritarianism and the hypocrisy of the regime in this, colonialism, so much to think on. This was a really great food for thought book. The fantasy, as I said before, it's more of an added flavour than it is a major focus. But the fantasy elements add just yet more intrigue and interest, I think. Like, on the edge of the city, there's a strange forest or woodland that seems to magically change. It's kind of described as a portal to lands beyond Ilmar, the city. But we don't ever learn a huge amount about how it works or even kind of really what's, through it. But it's just mysterious. It's full of monsters and strange collections, a strange kind of race of people called indwellers. And it just adds this extra kind of eeriness, this extra threat into the world. There's the threat within the city, and then to get out, you've got to navigate a dangerous territory. It's this feeling of being trapped within this regime, I think is, kind of like increased by, you know, adding in this extra kind of strange, eerie, dangerous, magical kind of land or portal beyond. And then you've got the reproach, which is in the city. It's a derelict area of the city where no one wants to find themselves, and that's quite a sinister place. That's got some really interesting stuff in it, and some more interesting, fantastical stuff in it. I would like to have known maybe more about how the magic and the demons, monsters, all that kind of thing, how all of that works. But then that would be adding in a hell of a lot more to an already, you know, complex and long story. The story never felt lacking because of the lack of focus on that kind of stuff. To be honest, it just all added to the richness of the storytelling and of the world. As I say, one of the reasons why I wanted to try this book was to dip my toe in the waters of fantasy. And I think, whilst this wasn't, you know, necessarily as fantastical as I expected or even maybe hoped when I sort of picked it up, it was actually a great book to ease me in to some fantasy stuff without bombarding me from the get-go with complex magic systems, alien concepts, all that kind of stuff, because that's what I struggle with often in fantasy. All the fantasy stuff felt manageable and fitting to this world, and I could enjoy it immensely just as like a layer of the world building, rather than having to wrangle my understanding of it as a focal point. So in that respect, it really worked for me. So yeah, I absolutely loved this, which is not really a massive shock. I've talked about how much I enjoy Tchaikovsky's stuff several times this year already. A note on the audiobook, by the way, as well, because I had it as an audio, narration was spot on. It was David Thorpe narrating, who also did Cage of Souls by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which I listened to last month, a couple of months ago, lost track. But yeah, absolutely brilliant in this. And the choice of accents that they used for the audiobook, for the different nationalities within the city. So you've got a variety of Scottish accents for the Ilmari, who are the natives. Dependent on their class, you've got a different sort of Scottish accent. Then you've got some sort of Russian, maybe Eastern European for the Aorwan, who are the immigrants essentially. You've got kind of an RP and slightly Weasley sometimes accent for the like English accent for the Palestine authorities, which worked really well, and various other bits, you know, peppered in, some Irish and French, things like that, peppered in as required, basically. And yeah, that worked brilliantly. It really helped me situate myself with, you know, which character was in which faction and their class, and, you know, that kind of thing. It was so well done. I you know, respect to whoever came up with that way of doing it, because it for me it worked beautifully. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed this, but the extent to which I enjoyed it surprised me a lot. I did not expect to really love this one. And yeah, Adrian Tchaikovsky has cemented his place as my current favourite author for the time being, for sure. So to my rating then, I will whiz through my rating. I will pop it up on screen for you. Characters then is an 8. Generally really well developed characters that I eventually managed to connect to, although as I say, it was a little more difficult at the beginning because of the amount of bouncing around. But some characters by the end of it that I was really invested in and that I really enjoyed, and generally a fantastic cast all round. Atmosphere, setting and world building, that's a 9. I feel like there were some bits of it that I would have just liked to have seen a little bit more filled out, maybe a little more balance with some of the other stuff that was incredibly detailed, but that's a nitpick really. But it's a 9 for atmosphere and setting, etc. Writing for me is a 10. This was brilliant. I absolutely loved every bit of it. I was hanging on every word. I loved the humour, the darkness. The prose is just beautifully done. Yeah, absolutely love the writing. Plot is a 9. Lots of plots going on, lots of subplots, lots of little side plots, but it all gets woven back in beautifully to this overarching plot, and its pacing was excellent. No plot holes that I could see, things like that. So yeah, plot is a 9. Ideas is a 9 as well. So much to think about, so many ideas being discussed, or at least questions being asked, I would say. But just so much to think about, and the way it's woven together in the plot through the characters, etc., is brilliant. And enjoyment is a 10. Yeah, absolutely glued to this one. I didn't really want it to end. It was one of those I was, kind of chomping at the bit to listen to it every night, and had to kind of like contain myself a little bit because it was a buddy read and I didn't want to just race ahead and finish it. But yeah, it was fantastic, and I will definitely listen to this again at some point. So if we add all of those scores up and divide by 6, we get a 9.17 out of 10. So I will round that down to a 9 out of 10. And that is, of course, a 5-star read on the story graph. So, yes, those are my thoughts. Another awesome story, another hit from Adrian Tchaikovsky. Lekden and I both had a blast with this one, I will say. And the buddy reading experience with him was really great. There was so much to discuss, and there were twists and turns that I kind of couldn't wait to discuss with somebody. So, it's great being able to jump on and go, this bit, and just discuss all of the ideas that are in it. That's always fantastic. I will be diving into book 2 in the trilogy very soon. Hopefully it is another buddy read with Lekden again, if we can figure out a workable schedule for us both to do it. Book 2, House of Open Wounds, that one's called. Looks to be quite different. Certainly a different setting, but with one of the kind of major characters from City of Last Chances returning as a main character really in this. But to be honest, whatever it is about and wherever it's set in this world that Tchaikovsky's built, I think I'm going to enjoy it. I'm expecting another interesting ride. So that will do from me today. Thank you very much for watching, folks. As always, do let me know in the comments if you have read City of Last Chances and what you thought of it if you have, or let me know if I've inspired you to give it a go. I do thoroughly recommend it. I will be back on Tuesday with a little tag video for you, so I do hope you'll join me for that then. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.